In June 1995 at 3:45 a.m., a 34-year-old mother and her 11-year-old daughter, Lacey, were reported missing by their family. Unbeknownst to them, a serial killer was prowling the area, successfully eluding capture. A police officer, examining the mother's office and documenting the scene with photographs, discovered Lacey. She was tied to a chair, her head bowed and seemingly lifeless. However, while taking another photograph, something unexpected happened.
When I started to take the photograph, she kind of turned and looked up at me. It's kind of like seeing someone rise from the dead.
I woke up, I heard, and I thought, is there someone taking pictures? And I turned my head, and when I did, I heard a man say, "This one's alive."
The enigma surrounding Lacey, her mother, and the other victims of this serial killer lingered unresolved until the little girl in the photograph was found alive. Her survival offered a glimmer of hope and a crucial lead in unraveling the truth. Mary Phillips was born in 1961 in Bradford, a small town in Arkansas. During her high school years, she met James Phillips, her lifelong love. They started dating at that time and eventually married. Mary became a devoted wife and mother to 3 children. Their first child, Darla, was born in 1979, followed by Jessie 2 years later, and their youngest daughter, Lacey, was born in 1984. The Phillips family spent several years living in Hope before moving in 1990 to the quaint town of Bald Knob, also in Arkansas. Mary was known for her deep religious beliefs and was regarded by those who knew her as a wonderful person with a radiant smile that could light up any room. Professionally, Mary trained as an accountant and worked at a tax office. In her free time, she enjoyed spending time with her family, gardening, and engaging in outdoor activities. On June 6, 1995, at the age of 34, Mary went to work as usual while her husband was away on a business trip. That afternoon, Darla dropped off her younger sister Lacey, who was 11 at the time, at their mother's office since Mary was supposed to take Lacey to a dentist appointment after work. Darla then left to attend a friend's birthday party, kissing her mother goodbye and telling her she loved her. Later that evening, Jesse, the Phillips' second child, grew worried when neither his mother nor Lacey had returned home. He called his father, who was out of town. James instructed his son to check if Mary had been in an accident nearby. Jesse followed his father's advice but could not find her. James then asked Jesse to stay at home, believing Mary might return at any moment. As the night progressed and there was still no sign of Mary and Lacey, James's concern grew, leading him to contact the police to report his wife and daughter missing since 3 p.m. the previous day. Upon receiving the report, 3 police officers went to Mary's workplace. In the parking lot, they found a lone truck parked beside the building, which was registered to Mary. One of the officers entered the office and discovered Mary dead, with her hands bound behind her back and naked from the waist down. The officer immediately alerted his colleagues, who began their investigation by noticing drag marks leading to the bathroom door. Upon opening it, they found Lacey tied to a chair and brutally beaten. The officers initially believed the girl might have also died due to her severe condition. A detective who was photographing the crime scene captured an image with a flash where Lacey was lying. To his astonishment, Lacey turned her head and looked directly at him. Her brown hair, matted and darkened by blood, covered the right side of her face. Despite her grave injuries, Lacey had survived for about 10 hours tied up. She asked about her mother, and the detective could only reassure her to stay calm and try to rest until the ambulance arrived. He was struck by the child's bravery. Lacey had to pass by her mother's body to leave the office and was urgently taken to a nearby hospital for treatment. She had severe head injuries that required surgery and a stay in the intensive care unit. Meanwhile, the police contacted James, urging him to return home immediately. He packed his bags and drove back, unaware of the details of the situation. Once Lacey's condition stabilized, she was able to describe her attacker, providing details about his appearance, clothing, hairstyle, and tattoos, one on his arm and another resembling a tear under his left eye. Her description was crucial in helping the police identify the suspect as Jack Johnson Jr., a man known to them due to multiple previous arrests for burglary, theft, and drug use. Detectives then went to question him. A state police investigator interviewed Jack, who was 30 years old at the time. Surprisingly, Jack confessed to the crime without any pressure, detailing his actions. At one point, he even mentioned that if he could, he would take the investigator's gun and end his life right there. His demeanor during the interrogation and the chilling details he provided about the attack made it evident to the officers that Jack had acted with absolute cold-bloodedness. Jack claimed that his actions were motivated by revenge and anger because his wife had been sexually assaulted, and the police had not thoroughly investigated the incident. However, there is no precise information about when or to whom Jack was married, nor about the incident he referred to. According to the detective's investigation, on that fateful day, June 6, 1995, Jack saw Mary enter the building where she worked while he was painting a sign nearby. Later, when Lacey was already in the office with her mother, he decided to enter. Some sources say he used the excuse of looking for a job, while others claim he asked to borrow some accounting books, after which he left. However, he returned that same day with a gun, latex gloves, and wire. Jack forced Mary to lie face down on the floor and made Lacey do the same on top of her mother before robbing the cash register. He then tied their hands with wire and took Lacey to a bathroom, where he strapped her to a chair. The little girl pleaded with him not to hurt her mother, to which he responded by saying he would harm her instead. He then struck Lacey at least 8 times on the head with the gun, causing her to lose consciousness. Jack returned to the room where Mary was, struck her on the head, and sexually assaulted her. Mary fought back with all her might, but Jack overpowered her by strangling her with his hands. He then wrapped the coffee maker's electrical cord around her body until she stopped breathing. Meanwhile, Lacey regained consciousness and, realizing she was injured, began calling out for her mother. Jack went back to the bathroom and choked Lacey until she passed out again. She was gravely injured with multiple fractures and barely clinging to life. Believing the child had died, Jack left her in the small room and fled the scene. But who was this man capable of committing such a heinous act? Jack was born on August 10, 1964, in Toledo, Ohio. His father was an alcoholic and his mother had gambling problems. Jack was one of 7 siblings but had a particularly close relationship with the youngest, who was a year and a half younger than him. Jack suffered a high fever and seizures when he was just a year old. He was later diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, and at the age of 5, he began taking Ritalin as part of his treatment. Around this time, he also started experiencing hallucinations. It was also revealed that Jack suffered physical and sexual abuse as a child and was said to exhibit two personalities. On one hand, he could be a loving and affectionate child who enjoyed drawing and telling stories. On the other hand, he could become filled with rage and react violently, often lashing out at family members. As he grew older, Jack began acting violently towards animals, killing several of them. He also got into numerous troubles with the police and was eventually placed in a juvenile detention center. There, he was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, antisocial behavior, and a tendency to bang his head against cabinets. At a young age, Jack became addicted to alcohol and other drugs, seemingly as a way to escape the pain he had endured. This cocktail of abuse, illness, and substance use made Jack a man unable to control his life. Physically, Jack was distinguished by a series of tattoos, including hearts and barbed wire on his arms and wrists. In 1985, Jack had a daughter with a woman whose details remain unknown. The child was put up for adoption and raised in Toledo by a family that provided her with a comfortable and protected life. Jack was a tormented man who attempted suicide twice, once in 1989 and again in 1991 when he jumped off a bridge. In 1995, he voluntarily admitted himself to a mental health center, reporting suicidal thoughts. After evaluation, experts diagnosed him with bipolar disorder. According to case reviews, he used methamphetamines to cope with this mental illness, which causes extreme mood swings, from euphoria and irritability to depression. These changes can affect sleep, energy, activity levels, judgment, behavior, and clarity of thought. Bipolar disorder is a lifelong condition that can be managed with treatment, typically involving medication and psychological support. After seeking help at the mentioned institution, Jack left after 6 days, although the circumstances of his departure are unclear. 6 months after his brief stay at the mental health center, Jack committed the horrific attack that took the life of a loving mother and left 3 children motherless, and James without the love of his life. A few days after Jack's arrest, a preliminary hearing was held at the county circuit court. During Jack's trial, the district attorney sought the death penalty, arguing that Jack was a dangerous man likely to commit another violent crime. Reports indicated that during one of the hearings, Jack himself asked to be executed immediately. One of the key witnesses, Investigator Howard, recounted Jack's detailed confession of the crime. Additionally, evidence was presented, including the photograph taken of Lacey at the crime scene when officers initially believed she had died from the beating Jack inflicted. Another significant moment was when Lacey, who had survived the attack, took the witness stand and identified Jack as the perpetrator. Jack pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, expressing deep remorse for his actions and stating that he was haunted by the ghosts of his victims. He claimed he could not forgive himself and would willingly give up his life if it could undo the harm he caused. On April 17, 1996, the jury delivered its verdict. Jack was found guilty. He was sentenced to death for murdering Mary Phillips, received a life sentence for sexually assaulting her, and an additional 30 years for the attempted murder of Lacey Phillips, along with a $15,000 fine. In the years following, Jack's defense team filed numerous appeals against his conviction, focusing on mitigating evidence and the legality of Arkansas's death penalty laws. The attorneys argued that they were not allowed to present critical evidence to the jury that could have mitigated the sentence, such as reports confirming his bipolar disorder and constant hallucinations. They also pointed out that only $6,400 had been spent on his defense, whereas a comprehensive investigation would typically cost tens of thousands of dollars. Additionally, they relied on an expert who was later deemed incompetent by the state medical board. Meanwhile, the Phillips family struggled to adjust to life without Mary. Darla took on the role of an improvised mother, cleaning the house, preparing meals, and taking care of Lacey and Jesse. While awaiting execution on Arkansas's death row, Jack's genetic profile was entered into the National DNA Database. This eventually led to the revelation of dark secrets from his past. In 2002, a detective reopened the case of Lorraine Ann Barrett, a 32-year-old woman from Bridgeville, Pennsylvania, who was murdered in June 1991. Lorraine, known as Laurie, graduated in 1977 from South Fayette High School and worked as a customer service representative for a telephone company in Washington, Pennsylvania. She was on vacation in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, when she met her assailant at a bar where she was last seen. Witnesses reported that a man with multiple tattoos accompanied her to her room at the Days Inn Lauderdale South Motel. Once in the room, the man beat her, assaulted her, and strangled her to death before fleeing. In the early hours of June 1, 1991, a maintenance worker found Laurie's body in her hotel room. The police were immediately notified, and an investigation began to identify the attacker. Authorities created a composite sketch of the suspect, describing a man with several tattoos, including barbed wire and hearts with names. This information was distributed throughout the county. When Jack's sister saw the description and sketch of the man wanted for the murder of a woman, she immediately thought it resembled her brother. Although she didn't believe Jack was guilty and thought it was a case of mistaken identity, she still told their father. He advised her not to tell their mother. Subsequently, their father put Jack on a bus to Arkansas. Despite their efforts, the police could not locate the culprit, and the case quickly went cold. 12 years after Laurie's death, the case was reopened. The detectives sent fluid samples collected from Laurie's body and the crime scene to be compared with databases that hadn't existed when the crime occurred. The following year, the system found a match with Jack's DNA archived in Arkansas. Based on this result, a second test was conducted at the State Forensic Laboratory, conclusively proving that Jack had committed the crime against Laurie. It was also determined that his tattoos and features matched those of the suspect who had murdered the tourist in Fort Lauderdale. Florida authorities then issued an extradition order for Jack, who was at that time in maximum security prison in Arkansas, appealing his sentence for the third time after being condemned to death. Jack would now face justice again on charges of first-degree murder and sexual assault in Broward County. Once in Fort Lauderdale, Jack met the detective who was handling Laurie's case. To the detective, it was evident that Jack was a serial killer. He earned Jack's trust, leading to Jack's confession that he had killed another person in Broward County. Although Jack didn't provide the victim's name, he promised that he would reveal his secret someday. A similar situation occurred between Jack and his sister during one of her prison visits. She asked if there were other victims, and he admitted there was one more but didn't give any details, promising to explain everything in a letter when the time came. For Laurie's family, discovering after so long who had taken her life was both a shock and a relief. Her sister stated that it was the news she had always wanted to hear, but learning about it this way was overwhelming because it was so unexpected. Finally, in 2005, Jack was tried for Laurie's murder. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was then returned to Arkansas to await his execution. A couple of years later, Jack's defense continued to seek clemency. His lawyer argued in a hearing that the jury forms in Jack's trial contained contradictory information and pointed out that such ambiguities were typically resolved with new sentencing hearings ordered by the Supreme Court. He also argued that Jack's bipolar disorder had not been adequately presented to the jury, explaining that while it didn't excuse his actions, it did offer an explanation. Despite the clemency hearings not succeeding, Jack's execution was postponed multiple times over the years. Among other reasons, this was due to various illnesses he suffered, including high blood pressure and diabetes, which eventually led to the amputation of his leg. In parallel, in 2010, Jack's biological daughter wanted to learn about her biological parents. She filed a petition with a probate court to disclose her birth certificate, which had her mother's contact information. She called her mother and discovered that her father was Jack, a man on death row in Arkansas. As a single mother of two, she struggled to process this reality. She was shocked, filled with guilt and confusion about the man who had fathered her, but also grateful for the family that had raised her. Feeling compelled to reach out, she wrote a letter to Jack in prison. Soon after, she began receiving boxes of Jack's writings and paintings he had made for her two young children. While she knew Jack deserved to be in prison for his crimes, she also felt that he had changed. Jack's execution was scheduled for November 14, 2015, but it was suspended due to legal challenges related to the drugs used in the execution procedures. In 2017, the state of Arkansas decided to resume executions, and among those scheduled was Jack. In April of that year, a new clemency hearing was held, but Jack refused to attend, opting instead to send a handwritten letter to the state parole board for his lawyer to read. In the letter, he expressed regret not only for his actions but also for the hearing itself, stating he was ready to face death at the hands of the state. He forgave his executioners, acknowledging someone had to carry out his sentence. Jack made it clear that he would reject any commutation from a death sentence to life imprisonment, as he refused to spend any more time in what he described as a rat hole prison. He felt he had no right to seek forgiveness and was tormented by his actions toward Mary and her daughter, attributing his crimes to years of mental illness, abuse, drugs, and poor decisions. Jack's lawyer highlighted his shame and remorse. During the hearing, Lacey, who by then was 32 years old and married, declared that she didn't want to live another day knowing Jack was still alive. She expressed frustration that more than 20 years after the incident, justice had yet to be served. For the Phillips family, the delays in Jack's execution had been a torturous journey, preventing closure for the horrors Mary and Lacey endured. After 21 years on death row, Jack prepared to face his sentence and declared himself ready to die. He gave his sister a letter written in 2006, instructing her to open it a year after his execution date. Jack's biological daughter traveled to Arkansas to see her father for the first and last time, the day before his execution. They held hands, tried to maintain a cheerful attitude, forgave each other for past hurts, and reminisced about her birth. Jack gave his daughter his wedding ring, which she now wears on a chain around her neck. On April 24, 2017, Jack consumed his last meal: fried chicken, potato wedges with tartar sauce, beef jerky, 3 candy bars, and a chocolate shake. Around 7 p.m., he gave a 2-minute final statement apologizing to Lacey, expressing disbelief at how he had hurt her, and professing his love for her as if she were his own daughter. He added that he hoped in time they could understand who he truly was and that he was not a monster. In a controversial statement, he implied there was a reason for the tragic events of that fateful day. He also left a written note stating that he aimed to become a better person in prison, practicing Buddhism and studying physics, and that no words could fully convey his remorse. At 52 years old, Jack was executed alongside another death row inmate, Marcel Williams, marking the first double execution in the United States in 17 years. His death was pronounced at 7 p.m., making him the 1,450th person executed in the U.S. since 1976. Mary's husband, James, lamented the long wait for justice, but felt relief at its eventual achievement. He also expressed sympathy for Jack's family during their ordeal. Jack's sister stated she felt pain for the victims and prayed for them constantly, acknowledging Jack needed to be punished for his unforgivable acts. However, she also remembered him as a loving child and wanted to be present at his execution to support him, though the Arkansas Department of Correction denied her request. A year after Jack's execution, his sister opened the letter he had given her. The 4-page letter, he confessed in detail to the murder of Regina Harrison, providing details only the killer would know. Jack wanted Regina's family to know the truth, claiming her spirit had visited and haunted him for 3 years until he confessed. He described Regina's initial anger and longing for her parents, but said she eventually understood him and forgave him, although he could never forgive himself. He expressed deep remorse and stated he could not rest in peace until Regina's family knew what had happened. Jack instructed his sister to send the letter to the police. In November 2018, she sent it to the Broward police, leading to Regina's body being exhumed and her DNA analyzed, tests that were not possible in the 1980s when the crime occurred. In February 2019, based on the DNA results, the Broward County prosecutor officially announced that Jack was responsible for Regina's death, a crime for which another man had been convicted. In truth, Regina was Jack's first victim, a crime he committed at the age of 18. Regina, a 20-year-old college student, was kind, sweet, and deeply religious, attending Palm Beach Atlantic College, a Christian school in West Palm Beach. On May 12, 1983, Regina left her parents' house for an evening bike ride in the North Beach neighborhood of Hollywood, Florida, but never returned home. Jack spotted her while she was cycling, approached her, and decided to head to the beach. As darkness fell, he kidnapped her, took her to Westlake Park, where he stripped her, assaulted her sexually, and strangled her to death, leaving her body abandoned in the park. The next day, friends and family found Regina's naked body in the woods. During the investigation, witnesses reported seeing Regina riding her bike with a slim, long-haired man on a black bicycle along a popular trail on Hollywood Beach. Authorities created a sketch of the suspect based on the description. For 5 months, there were no leads until Detective John Curcio, previously mentioned, saw a television program about the crime. He was part of the unit that captured Ronald Henry Stewart, a serial sexual assailant who had terrorized women in Florida and Mississippi in the late 1980s. Curcio realized that Ronald matched the suspect's sketch, slim, long-haired, and riding a black bicycle when arrested. A witness who had seen Regina and her alleged attacker at the beach identified Ronald as the man with Regina from a photo lineup. Additionally, an acquaintance of Ronald claimed he had confessed to killing a woman in the park. Soon, Ronald was charged with Regina's murder. Despite several factors suggesting Ronald's innocence, including non-matching fingerprints at the crime scene, he pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. He admitted to 3 counts of sexual assault with a deadly weapon in Broward County in exchange for prosecutors dropping charges in 6 other cases. Ronald was sentenced to 50 years in prison in January 1985, to be served concurrently with his other sentences for sexual offenses. He never regretted the plea deal nor claimed any coercion in accepting it. Ronald Henry Stewart served most of his time in Mississippi, but was transferred to Florida in 2007, where he died of cancer the following year. Jack's confession to Regina's murder proved Ronald had no connection to the case. Following this revelation, prosecutor Paula McMahon announced they would work to overturn Ronald's wrongful conviction and investigate Jack's past for other potential victims in Florida and across the U.S. The story of Mary, Lacey, and the Phillips family is a grim reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the most unexpected places. It is also a testament to courage and a demonstration that the pursuit of truth and justice must never waver, as they can emerge when least expected. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.